How good it is and how sweet. Hine matov umanayim, that all of us are gathered here together. Shevet Achim, all of us who are brothers. Can I see a show of hands? Who here is a brother? Wave at me. I see you. We have brothers in the room. Shevet Nashim, Gam Yachad. All of us who identify as women. Wave at me if you are a sister. If somebody calls you sister, hi. Shevet Kulanu Yachad. When all of us of every gender identity and sexual orientation and personal identifiers and pronouns, when all of us sit together. Wave at me if you're somebody. Raise a virtual hand, raise a physical hand. We have a Zoom room full of somebodies, right? Absolutely. So Shana Tova Umetuka. I'm Rabbi Yael Rapport. For those who don't already know me, for those who have not already lived through me torturing you with Hebrew prayers and teachings and stories for your probably many, many years, or maybe this is your first time with Congregation Beit Simchat Torah, the LGBTQ Synagogue of New York City. And this is a part of our Families with Children's programs, and also a very special gathering of many of our Limud students, those who are a part of Cbst's Jewish education program for children who are K through teen track, although today we're focusing on you, 6 to 12-year-olds. If you are younger than 6, if you are older than 12, we are so delighted that you're here, because we want to say Shana Tova, a happy new year to everybody in these very special services. Today, we are going to do many exciting and interesting things. We are going to pray, which I think is very exciting and interesting. We are going to sing songs and listen to gorgeous music, thanks to our brilliant Limud song leader, Rachel Chang. We are so lucky and so happy that Rachel is with us online this year for High Holidays, and Rachel is with us in person for Limud, which begins on October 9th. We are going to learn amazing things about the natural world, thanks to our principal, Jennifer Kleinbaum, nature educator extraordinaire, and the person who is solely responsible for all of the Families with Children's programs that happen at Cbst ever. We're going to do lots of cool interactive Zoomy computer technology things, thanks to Rosemary Minkler, who is our Zoom technician. Without her, we would not be able to see each other today. Thank you, Rosemary. And we're going to hear a story, but this is a very specific story for a new year. This is no average story, if I do say so myself. Who was here last year when we got to choose our own adventures? Who was here for Rosh Hashanah last year when I told a story that you decided not only how it ended, but how it middled and basically how it began? Hands up if you were here. Hi, nice to see you back. Once again, we are going to tell a story together where you get to decide what happens, and it's all based around riddles. So you might remember last year, the great riddle off between King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. And this, my friends, is the next chapter that I promised you, that I'm sure everybody was waiting for an entire year, right? Maybe you were waiting for other things too. That's okay. This is the story, a special Rosh Hashanah story about King Solomon and the bee. Once upon a time, a long time ago, across the oceans and across the centuries, a king ruled in Israel named Solomon, who is the heir to King David. Solomon is considered the wisest person to have ever lived in Jewish tradition. He was kind and thoughtful, and from all over the world, people would travel to Jerusalem to hear his sage advice. In their gratitude, they would repay King Solomon with treasures from all around the world, from wherever they came and whatever they thought would be the right gift for the wisest person the world had ever known. King Solomon's kitchen held every delicious and exotic spice from every cuisine of cooking. His gardens bloomed with every scent of flower, every type of towering tree. His library held every book and scroll and story. His treasury had within it every precious jewel, and his walls were hung with works of art from the greatest of the age. There was nothing on this earth that King Solomon had not seen, no question that he could not answer. It was said that he was so clever, he knew all the languages of all the animals in the animal kingdom. King Solomon lived as befits a wealthy king in the finest of palaces. Everything was made of gold. Even the taps in the bathroom were made of gold. His clothes were made out of the finest of silks with golden threads. He ate only the finest of food on golden plates, of course. One night, when King Solomon was lying asleep in his golden bed, with his silken sheets woven with golden threads pulled up over his head, only his rather large red nose was visible. for the king had not worn proper sunscreen as he hiked around his palace gardens the day before. And King Solomon snored gently through his red nose just above the covers as he slept. It was summer, and the room was filled with roses, and the scent of the flowers wafted around the castle, and at the windows the light of the moon shone. One window was open, and the smell of roses just poured out the window. And then a bee flew into the room in search of those beautiful flowers. Hungry for food, the bee was overcome with the smell of roses. Which one should it pollinate first? It darted from flower to flower, back and forth. It grew so dizzy and confused, it made a dreadful mistake. The bee landed on the king's nose. But what do you think happened? What happened next? Do you think that the bee tried to pollinate King Solomon's nose? Do you think the bee recognized its mistake and just flew out the window as quick as it came? Did it sting the king? Vote in our poll and you decide what happens next in the story, and we'll give you a little time to think it over as we sing together our next prayer. And so this is a special song about honey and bees. We always think about honey on Rosh Hashanah because we say Shana Tova Umituka. May you have a new year that is good and sweet, matok, mituka. And what do we usually think of when we think of sweetness in Jewish tradition? It's honey, straight from the bees. And there's actually a tradition that some of you at Cbst have experienced, that when you're learning a new thing, your teacher likes to put something sweet at the end of your page, whether that's a drop of honey or maybe a chocolate chip or a compliment or a sticker. And so this song is called Sweet as Honey because we say that words of Torah and every new thing that you learn is a sweet lesson.
Sweet as honey, sweet as honey, sweet as honey on our tongue. Sweet as honey, sweet as honey, sweet as honey on our tongue. Baruch atah
Our poll is ending. Get your results in. And while the results are tabulated, we turn to Jennifer Kleinbaum for some extra special insight into the life of bees.
Thank you, Rabbi Rapport. Well, I wanted to share with you today a few things that I've been thinking about this Rosh Hashanah. The first thing is that we always say that we hope that you have a sweet new year. And I've been thinking about how it's tricky to think about the food that we eat. Oftentimes we'll eat apples and honey, or what other fruits do you think are sweet? We've got pomegranates and what else? You can put them in the chat. I don't know, whatever other foods you think are the sweetest. But oftentimes I see dates, oftentimes we eat apples with honey. And I was thinking, what is it about the sweet food that was the metaphor for a sweet new year? And what do we really mean when we say that? So later on, at the end of the service, I'm going to ask you what kinds of sweet things that you've done in the past year that have helped to build your family, your community, your hive of people that have been surrounding you over the course of the past year. And what sweet things you can think of that you might do next year to help other people's year be sweet. So I'm going to come back to that. I'm not sure if everybody got a chance to see the puzzle, so I'm going to share a quick link in the chat, just so that if you are interested, you can do this puzzle while I'm talking. I won't be insulted if you click over. And there you go. All you have to do when you get there is you can click on a color and then click on that letter, and it's going to slowly fill in our puzzle. I need all of your help because it's 4,000 little squares of a puzzle. So I can't do it by myself. You're going to have to help me. So as you look at the puzzle, oh, I see pineapple and plums and mango. Wow, those would all taste good with honey. Strawberries and oranges and clementines and berries and bananas and peaches, figs. You are a very well-rounded taste bud group. Not every kid eats all of those fruits. I'm so glad to hear that you do. So I'm going to show you a few pictures on this screen. Don't worry if you're on the puzzle. And I just wanted to tell you a couple of things about honey and about bees, so that I can sort of set us off on this sweet New Year path. Let's see if I can share my screen with you. I'm not as fast at this as all the other tech people, so I appreciate your patience. All right, so here we go. Oh, where is it? Sorry, give me just a moment. I don't see it. It's here somewhere. There we go. So another thing I was thinking about is when we are often talking about, when we're talking about in the Torah and at the end of the 5 books of Moses, at the end of the Torah, Moses and all the people that were slaves in Egypt have gone through the desert, and they get to this last place, and God tells them that Adonai is going to bring you to a place and give you this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And that's a little bit of a weird concept, that if something is flowing with milk and honey. And I was thinking about it, and I didn't know what that meant. Did that mean that there's a lot of cows there? Does it mean that there's a lot of bees there? And as I thought about it more and more, I tried to think about what it would mean for the land to give us milk and honey. And I was really thinking that maybe it had more to do with the space that the land was giving this new group of people, these Israelites, to be Israelites that are coming into the land. They're going to be able to put all of their livestock out to pasture because they've got this big new land. So maybe that's where the milk comes from. And maybe there are a lot of areas that you can plant things like flowers, or farm your fruits and vegetables. And maybe that is where we get the honey from, if there's a lot of flowers for the bees to pollinate and actually give us that honey. So that was just one of the things I've been thinking about, as we go through Rosh Hashanah. Let's see if I can. Nope. All right, let's see here if I can find the new share. Sorry about the about the wait. I appreciate your patience. There we go. Can you see a bee or not yet?
Not yet, Jen.
Not yet. Oh no.
I think you need to stop your share and try again.
Okay. Let us do that again. Now, can you see a bee?
Now we see the bee.
All right. So we've got this bee here, and we all associate bees with honey. And I wanted to just show you the parts of the bee, since I don't know if this is something that all of you know already, and you can please put in the chat any parts of the bee that you see that you know of. The part of the bee that I wanted to talk the most about is actually this part over here. Let's see, the antenna. You know, I know a lot about insects. I've studied a lot about animals, and even I'm surprised at how many senses the antenna can give you. The antenna can measure smell and taste, and it can feel wind and the temperature, and if the humidity is in the air, and gravity, which way is up and which way is down. And what else? There's all sorts of other senses that bees are able to do. It takes our whole face to do those things. A bee can do almost all of them just on their antenna. Other parts of the body, just so that you don't get fooled, are these legs. If you count them, I don't know if you can see how many are on this one side of the bee, and if you double them, then you'll be able to see. You'll be able to figure out how many there should be. I see people are naming the parts of the other parts of the bee. So here we've got 3 legs on this side, 3 on the other. So all bees have 6 legs, just like all insects, by the way. Every insect in the whole world has 6 legs. And bees have actually 2 pairs of double wings. So, or I should say 2 pairs of wings. So if you see an animal, a little flying bug in your house, and it's yellow and black, and you think, oh my gosh, there's a bee in my house, but it only has 2 wings that are sort of sticking up from it. And instead of having these nice long antennae, it has 2 little stubby antennas, or if it has any more than these 6 legs, then you know that that's not a bee, and you don't have to be worried about it. I also see that some of you have already identified the honey pouch here. Let's see if I can get this one. On the hind legs of the bee is where they collect their pollen. They call it a pollen basket. The bee goes into a flower, scrapes all the pollen off. It's probably not very comfortable because they're full of hair. Scrape it all off. And then they put it in their little pollen basket so that it stays there until they get back to the hive. Later on, I'm going to give you all another link to see if you can tell the difference between a bee and a fly and a wasp that all look like bees, and they're all white and black, and they look pretty much the same. And but now that you know the parts of the bee to look for, you might be able to tell the difference. The last thing I wanted to mention was about honey. I read that in Israel, over the course of a year, the country consumes 4 tons of honey every year. And guess what? 2 tons of it are just in the month of Rosh Hashanah, just in Tishrei. So all of us Jews are eating a lot of honey this month, and it's pretty delicious and pretty incredible. It actually takes, I brought my little teaspoons here, or teaspoons and tablespoons. All right, I know a lot of you have these little spoons at home. This one is the smallest one that I have. It's 1/4 of a teaspoon, 1/4 of a teaspoon. And it would take 3 bees their whole entire life, of going out, going to get 100 flowers of pollen, coming back and making honey with it over time, 3 bees to just fill up this little spoon. It's the fact that I could eat a spoonful of honey, and that's many, many bees' lives worth of honey, is quite amazing. They're one of the few animals that we've been able to work with, but are not domesticated. So bees are still wild no matter where we keep them, we're sort of using them to harvest the goods that they provide, but we're not keeping them in cages. We need them to go out to pollinate all of those flowers. And about a third of our fruits and vegetables and food that we eat is pollinated by bees. They're pretty useful since you can pick up a hive and bring it to another place when you're a farmer or when you're an orange grove farmer. It's very fascinating to me. Well, I hope that you guys are working on the puzzle and learning a little bit about bees. I'm going to come back in a little while and piggyback onto Rabbi Rapport's story and give you some more bee information.
Thanks, Jennifer. So we have sort of warmed up even on Jewish Standard Time, which is legendary for people running just a little bit late. We think everybody is here and everybody is gathered. It's time for us to get serious about our prayer. And the way that we do that is with a call to prayer. The service leader, a song leader like Rachel, a rabbi like me, anybody who's leading services, you don't need to be a song leader or a rabbi. They will call to you with the words of Baruch Hu, and they expect to be answered, to say, I'm here. You can count on me as a part of this prayer service this morning. Something that I wanted to point out to everybody really quickly is that Jewish music is not so secretly encoded. Just by listening to the sounds of prayers, very specific melodies, tunes you hear over and over again, they can tell you exactly what time it is of day, what time it is of season, and basically what month it is and what Jewish holiday it is, just by listening to them. You don't need to know the words. You could do this blindfolded, be picked up in a helicopter and be dropped anywhere in the world, hear these melodies and be able to say, well, it must be in the vicinity of September or October because this is the melody for the new year, and it must be the morning. And so that is the melody that we're going to sing for Baruch Hu this morning. It goes like this. And if you are in need of a stretch break, Jewish prayer has thought ahead for you and has put several moments in the service where it is traditional to stand up. So if you would like a stretch break, please stand up, rise with your body or rise with your spirit, and prepare to be counted for the Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu et Adonai, Hamevorach. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach, Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai Hamevorach, Leolam Va'ed. If you are standing and stretching, you can be seated. And usually in our Jewish prayer services, we use the language that unites all of us. Most Jewish people learn how to speak Hebrew through their Jewish education, no matter how old they are when they come to it. Some people are born speaking Hebrew, and some people learn it over time, like our students in our Limud B'Shabbat program. But there are lots and lots of languages, of course, in the whole world. There are some special Jewish languages like Yiddish and Ladino and Judeo-Arabic. But no matter where Jews are on the planet, we use the language that we share in our own communities to give words to our words of prayer. And not all of these languages are spoken. We know that we can communicate with all 5 of our senses, not just what we hear. And so what is familiar to many, many of you in our Limud program, in fact, so familiar that you helped us to make the video that we're about to play right now, is the fact that we can pray in many languages, including one time we did the Shema in cat language and we meowed our way through it. But this time in particular, we are going to pray using American Sign Language. And so Jen is going to teach us each of the signs so that you can follow along at home if you would like. And then you may see yourself or you may see some of your Limud friends on the screen leading you through the Shema.
Can we play the video first, Rosemary? There we go. In American Sign Language, the word Shema, to hear, might not resonate as much, since hearing is not, for the deaf community, hearing won't make sense when you're talking about a prayer that is central to Judaism. So what do you say instead of hearing? What is it that we're really doing? Really what we are doing is focusing. We're not just hearing, we can hear a lot of things. We're really focusing all of our attention. And so when you, in American Sign Language, the word for focus is like this. So if everybody can go like this, I was actually gonna ask, I don't know if it's possible for Rosemary, if you don't spotlight me, and if everybody can put their view on gallery, you'll be able to see everybody doing it. So we focus by putting our hands like this. That's Shema. Adonai is a sweep of the arm. You take whichever arm you write with, you put it on the other shoulder, and you sweep up Adonai. And now I realize I'm skipped the whole Yisrael part because that's the most confusing part. So in American Sign Language, there's different evolving ways to say Yisrael. Yisrael is Israel, but they don't mean the country of Israel. They mean the people of Israel. And different countries have different sign language ways in sign language to say the people of Israel, the Jews. Sometimes it's the sign of a beard. And in the video, we actually did the sign of the beard and then all of our hands coming together, the people of the state of Israel. But that didn't really make sense to Cbst. Here at Cbst, not all the Jews have beards. Do any of you have beards? No, I'm seeing a lot of shaking of heads. Not a lot of beards in this crowd, but we are the people of Israel. So instead, we've adopted what's actually in Brazilian Sign Language. The name is to make a Magen David, a Star of David. So you sort of make a triangle with your fingers, and then you flip it upside down to make the other triangle. So we've got Shema, and then Yisrael, the people of Israel. Adonai. Eloheinu just means our God. So you're going to bring that arm right down to your shoulder and make a swoop like a semicircle, our God. And then Adonai again. And then Echad. Echad means what? You can guess, right? All right, I see some people. Yeah, everybody's got it. It means one. So we've got Shema, focus, Yisrael, the people of Israel, Adonai, Eloheinu, our God, Adonai again, and Echad. And now Rachel's going to lead us in the Shema again, and we can all practice our American Sign Language and a little bit of Brazilian Sign Language while she sings.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu
And now, my friends, what I am sure you have been waiting for is the result of our poll. What happened to the bee? Did the bee try to pollinate King Solomon's nose? Did the bee escape through the window to go about its merry way? Or did it sting the king? By a very, very small margin, we have it stung the king. And that is how our story will go. Just as the king let out an enormous snore, the bee was so startled, it stung the king. The king woke with a tremendous shout. Ouch! What is happening? What was that? Who stung my nose? The servants rushed in. They were swatting the air with enormous fans. They were all trying to kill the tiny bee who had dared to sting the king. Stop, 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 cried the bee. Please don't kill me. Why not? Said the king. I was innocently fast asleep, and then you stung me. Oh, please, 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 King Solomon, spare me. I meant you no harm. I just got carried away by the smell of all these flowers, and I confused your nose for a rose. It was the same beautiful red color. Please don't kill me. Who knows? If you save my life, one day I might be able to save yours. The king hesitated. You, a tiny bee? How could you possibly help me? Well, said the bee, like all bees, you need me to pollinate your plants so that you have food to eat. Yes, said the king, of course I know that, but what else can you do that might be of special use to me, the king? I don't know, said the bee, but if you spare my life, we can find out. The king's sense of humor finally got the better of him. Despite his sore nose, he laughed and said, foolish bee, I will spare you. And as you say, who knows? Maybe one day I might have need of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, said the bee, and flew as fast as it could out the window, just in case the king changed his mind. The years passed. But one day, King Solomon had a visitor from a great African nation who you have met before. This was the Queen of Sheba, and the borders of her land stretched from what is now Yemen all the way to Ethiopia. It was not an easy thing to be a queen in those days, as you can imagine, and the Queen of Sheba was known throughout the world for her courageous heart and her clever mind. The queen was famous for her own impossible, creative riddles. And so it was no surprise when she arrived with a parade unlike any Jerusalem had ever seen, coming to King Solomon's palace with a challenge in mind. The queen came by sea. She arrived at the port of Jaffa in all of her glory. Not one, but 7 ships were spotted sailing into harbor, each ship flying the flag of the Queen of Sheba. The king called for his servants and was dressed in his finest of kingly robes, with a magnificent crown on his curly head, gold, of course. The ships came into harbor. The king was standing waiting. The 7 ships came to a standstill. Ropes were thrown, tied, and the ships were safely secured. The drawbridges were lowered, and then down the plank marched 100 servants down every one of those 7 ships' planks. Dancers were marching in perfect time, in perfect step together. They were all dressed in white, and each one carried in one hand a white flower. In silence, they marched down the plank and onto the harbor. In silence, they stood in lines, 10 people to a line, line after line after line. Every dancer stood stiffly at attention, holding out the flower in one outstretched arm. Not one of them made a single sound. Then the last person came down the plank, a small child with a letter in their hand. In silence, they marched up to the king, bowed, and handed King Solomon the letter. The king opened and read aloud. You, King Solomon, the Queen of Sheba said, are supposed to be the most brilliant person who ever was or ever will be. Your wisdom is said to be a gift from God. But if you are so wise, prove it to me. Each one of my servants holds a flower. Only one of these white flowers is real. Find the true flower amongst all of these false ones, and you will prove your power to me. Choose the real flower, and we will be allies forevermore. No one will stand in our way. But choose the false flower, and we will be at war. But which flower was real? The king thought for a while. They all look the same. How clever, but how confusing. And so much is riding on this decision. How could King Solomon tell which is the real flower? Tell me, what would you do? Would you try to figure it out by sight? Would you try to figure it out by smell? Would you try to figure it out by tasting every single flower? Vote, and we will decide together how the story continues. While we are waiting for everybody to vote and to consider, while you think up the best strategy, which one of your senses you would use, Rachel is going to lead us into our next prayer.
All right, next we have Miramoja, which is all about freedom and liberation. And we have another choice to make. So I have two different versions of the Miramoja. One of them is really fast and upbeat the whole time, and one of them has a really slow and dramatic beginning. So take a moment and think, do you want to hear the one that has a slow and dramatic beginning, or do you want to hear the one that's fast the whole time? And for this one, we're going to make a choice using our bodies. So you can stand up or do this sitting down. If you want to hear the one that's fast and upbeat the whole time, let's do some fast and upbeat hands in the air like this. And if you want to hear the one that's really slow and dramatic at the beginning, let's make some slow and dramatic hands near the bottom of your screen. And let's see what we have. I see a lot of votes for the fast and upbeat the whole time. Let's see, 1 or 2 for the slow and dramatic. It looks like we have a clear winner here for our fast and upbeat for today. So we'll save the slow and dramatic for next time. All right, here we go.
Well, now we're back to learning about bees and honey. But first, I wanted to show you what collectively this whole entire service congregation has done. Are you ready? This is the puzzle that you put together. 4,000 pieces of the puzzle. Mazel tov, you did it. I think some of you might have guessed what it was before we actually got there, correct? Yeah, I think so. Well, I wanted to tell you just a quick thing about the life cycle of a bee. Can everybody see the life cycle of the honeybee? Okay, so the first thing is that it starts off as an egg. And what I want you to think about is a butterfly and a caterpillar. It's the same exact process. all insects pretty much go through this process, but we usually only think of them for caterpillars and butterflies. So there's an egg, and then there's a larva, which is like a little caterpillar. And then it goes into a cocoon or a pupa. And then when it emerges from its pupa stage, it looks like an adult. And it might turn into a bigger adult or a little bit bigger of an adult, but bees don't live that long. So once they're born, they're pretty, as an adult, they pretty much stay that way. And I want to see if I can actually show you this great video of a time lapse of the life cycle of the bee. So let's see if I can get to my compilation here. All right. All right, I found another picture, but that's not my video. You guys write in the chat what you think is happening here. The life cycle of a bee seems pretty easy, but there's actually 3 different kinds of bees that live in a hive. There is the queen. I think you probably know that one. Do you know any of the names of the other? Do you know any of the names of the other kinds? Maybe Rabbi Rapport or Rachel, you could help me because I can't see the chat anymore.
We've got drones and workers.
You got it. You got it. The drones and the worker bees, they are incredible. It's actually a pretty amazing task that they're able to do. Let's see if I can. All right. Well, those drones are the male bees. They're the ones that help. They're the ones that help the queen to make her eggs. But really, that's just about all they do. The female bees are the workers, and they are all born to the queen. Every single bee in the entire hive is a young one, a kid, a child of that queen. It's a little crazy to talk about a matriarchal society where everybody is your child. 2,000 eggs a day that queen can lay for about 3 or 4 years. I'm very glad I'm not a queen bee. There's a lot of things that we are able to know about bees. They're actually the 2nd most studied animal after humans. And here's, let me see if I can, here is the video that I can share of, let's see if this is working. He's going to clear the bees off of the hive and then watch what happens. You're not stinging.
That looked delicious.
I would like to eat that. Would anybody else like to eat that? Maybe without the bees clearing off of it. I'm not totally sure I'd like to do that part. Yeah, I'd like to do that too. I see a lot of hands up. Actually, all the bees on the outside of that hive were all the worker bees. They're born, and when they're young, they help to feed all the larvae. They make those little honeycombs out of beeswax. They do all of the jobs in the hive. And when they get older, they fly out of the hive and they go forage for pollen and nectar. It's very hard to find pollen and nectar if you're just a little tiny, tiny bee. And we're going to see a little bit more about that at the end of the story.
Jennifer, a lot of people have the same question I do in the chat, which is, why didn't the bees sting that person when they were clearing them out of their home? Like, why wasn't this a video of somebody getting stung over and over again?
That's a really good question. In this particular video, it was a different species of honeybee. That's not the same species that we have here. And so not all bees will sting with equal equalness. But the other thing is that a lot of bees really just don't want to hurt you. We often get scared of them, and then we start waving our hands around, and the bee starts freaking out. And a bee that is really worried about something releases a pheromone, which is like a chemical smell that only the other bees can smell. And all the other bees come rush to the rescue. So if you anger one bee, they will let all the other bees know. In this case, he was sort of brushing them off softly. I've seen people do this. Beekeepers do this on hives. As sometimes when you're just very gentle, the bees just sort of go with it. They're much more concerned about, about everything staying calm. So if you're able to stay calm, they're usually able to also. The other thing I'll add is that a lot of things we think are bees are not bees. A lot of things that we think are bees are actually wasps. And so that's a totally different, they're a lot more aggressive than bees. Honeybees are not really that aggressive. Most people get stung when they step on them. So that happened to me a couple of years ago. So it's not the worst thing in the world unless you're allergic, and then you have to take some precautions. But yeah, they don't really want to sting you. After they sting you, they don't really have much of a life left, because that's the last thing they're going to do. So if they're going to sting you, they have to be willing to give up their life to protect their hive, which they do all the time, because they really want to work for their hive, their community, just like we will. Now I want to switch gears a little bit. I'm going to put the bees and honey to the side for just a moment, because I wanted to tell you about the shofar. I'm pretty sure all of you have heard a shofar before, but every year we are commanded to listen to the shofar, to hear the sounding of the shofar. It's an ancient Jewish musical instrument. It's the oldest one that we know of. It's made from a ram's horn, and it's only sounded on special occasions like Rosh Hashanah. It sounds like an alarm clock for our souls. It's telling us to wake up, wake up. The world is waiting for you. Wow, mazel tov. I couldn't hold my breath that long. Could you?
Together we continue in our service through all of the pieces that are so, so important for us to say every time Jewish people gather all together to pray, and especially on Rosh Hashanah. So we have many prayers that are communal, that work the best when they have lots and lots of voices all together in chorus or in harmony. But we also recognize that each of us might have our own private conversations that we may want to have with God, or just a little time to sort through everything that's happening in our own minds, in our own conversations with ourselves, so that we can use the opportunity of being together in a prayer community to figure out our world and our lives, or something that's really bothering us. What we're going to do next is a space of silent prayer. And this is an opportunity for those of you who have special prayers that you would like to recite this Rosh Hashanah to do so out of your machzor, your special prayer book for high holidays, out of any prayer book, or words of poetry that you really love. It also can just be a space for meditation. I don't know if anybody likes to meditate, if anybody practices following their breath in and out of their bodies to help them focus and calm down. You can do that too. I also want to open up the opportunity that the riddle of the rose is the one that Queen of Sheba brought to King Solomon this time. But there are lots of really great riddles out there. The Queen of Sheba and King Solomon both loved riddles. So if you need something to keep you busy during our silent prayer, we would love to see what is your favorite riddle. So you can think about it for a minute and put in the chat, what is your favorite riddle? And while we all take just 2 minutes to have some quiet time for ourselves to think up riddles or have personal conversations, we're going to hear another beautiful piece of Jewish music that lets us know it's Rosh Hashanah, it's the high holidays. This prayer is called Avinu Malkenu. It's one name for God out of God's many millions, and I'm not exaggerating, millions of names. And in this one, we call God a ruler and a parent. Avinu technically means our father, and Malkenu technically means our king. But this is a way that we think about God, especially on the high holidays, when maybe we're a little nervous and scared. We don't know what kinds of things are ahead for us in the year. So we like to think of somebody who's present in our lives, like a president or like a parent who can guide us through. So these are the sounds that you're hearing to accompany our private prayer. Feel free to put your riddles in the chat. And after just 2 minutes, we'll come back all together and sing this sacred song.
Let's learn the Hebrew together. So repeat after me. Avinu Malkenu. Try that. Avinu Malkenu. Good. Avinu Malkenu. Your turn. Avinu Malkenu. Avinu Malkenu. Avinu Malkenu, Chonenu va'anenu, Chonenu va'anenu, Kien banu ma'asim. Your turn. Kien banu ma'asim. Let's try that together. Ready? Avinu Malkenu. Avinu Malkenu. Avinu Malkenu. Avinu Malkenu, Chonenu va'anenu, Kien banu ma'asim. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed,
everybody, for listening to this beautiful, beautiful song, for singing along, for putting your riddles in the chat. We'll get back to those in a minute. This song has been passed down. The music has been sung from generation to generation to generation. And so maybe you can ask the grown-ups in your life, have you heard that song before? Maybe you can ask the elders in your life, like grandparents or other people who taught your parents. Do you know this song? And this is one of the important things about Jewish community, that we hold lessons and story and music, and we pass them down to one another. The story that I'm telling you today about King Solomon and the bee, even though we're choosing our own adventure and we're deciding how it goes, that's a very old story. That's a midrash from the 5th century, maybe the year 500, and we're telling it in 2021. And that's why Jews keep count of every year that passes, all 5,782 years since Jewish people began counting the number of the year. It's at this point in our service that we honor that memory, that we say that memory and passing down knowledge and music and stories is important to us. And we say thank you to all of the people in our lives and who came before us, who held those lessons, who held that music, who taught it to somebody else, who brought light to the world. And so I'd like to transition. I'd like to change up what we're using our chat for. We're about to recite a prayer called the Mourner's Kaddish, which are words that we say to thank God and thank the world for the opportunity to know somebody who has died. And this can be somebody who's in our family of origin, somebody that we are related to who we're remembering today. This could be somebody in our family of choice, somebody who has made a big impact on us, even though they're not related to us, like a teacher or a friend or a person who held a very important job in our lives. Or this could be for people that we didn't know, but that we think about and that we are grateful lived their lives in the way that we did because they made our lives better. So please, if you would like, you can put into the chat the name of somebody you're remembering, and we would love to know who they are to you. So maybe not just their name, but to say, this is my next door neighbor, or this is a justice on the Supreme Court, or this is my grandfather. Tell us who's in the room with us today on this Rosh Hashanah of 5782, who we remember. We're going to put the words of the Mourner's Kaddish on the screen. There are lots of different customs, different ways to recite this. And some people, it's considered an honor to stand up and recite it. Some people only stand up if they lost somebody very recently, so you might choose not to. And you can say it along with me, or you can answer me, or at the very end, you can say Amen. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Be'alma divrach hirutei ve'amlich malchutei. V'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach leolam u'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal. Shemei dekudsha brichu. Le'ela le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush bechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. V'imru. Amen. Our very last words of the prayer Kaddish are a prayer for peace. And these words are so important to us. The idea is so important to us that we want to sing them out loud. So Rachel is going to offer us 2 ways that we can choose to sing this prayer for peace. And I want to thank everybody for bringing your people into the room with us and sharing with us all of these people who brought blessings to your lives so that we could remember them together. This is what Jewish community is for. Let's pray for peace together.
All right, so there are lots of ways that we can pray for peace. Today we have two options. We can choose a version of Oseh Shalom that is slow and beautiful, or we can choose one that's really fast and sounds like a dance party. So, if you would like to hear the one that's slow and beautiful, I'm going to invite you to stand up and spin in a circle, or you can sit in your seat and show me something with a circle with your hand. Or if you want to hear the one that's really fast, then you can stand up and do some jumping jacks. Or if you want to stay in your seat, you can show me with your hands some jumping jack motions. So, looks like this one's pretty close. I see a lot of jumping jacks, and I see a few circles. It looks like we're going with our fast upbeat one. I thought that might be the case when I called it a dance party. All right, so we're going with our Nava Tehillah Oseh Shalom. It's gonna start a little bit slow and then it'll get fast pretty soon. Oseh Shalom V'Roma, Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel Ve'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom V'Roma, Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel Ve'imru
Everybody know this? Good thing I was signing to everybody to say applause. This is our ASL sign for applause and gratitude. The riddles in the chat have been amazing. Some of them are very silly, like I love the one about don't tell secrets on the farm. Some of them are extremely serious and complicated, very difficult to figure out. Some of them look quite popular, and some of them are almost as ancient as this story, like the riddle of the Sphinx. I am very impressed. So I hope everybody's following along in the chat so that you can add to your bank of riddles. And now It's time for us to find out what is the answer to the riddle of the rose. How could King Solomon tell which was the real flower of all of those 100 white flowers? There's only one real one. And overwhelmingly, he should try by smell. Well, you got it. How could King Solomon tell which was the real flower? Well, by smell, of course. He walked up and down every line of dancers holding out their white flowers, but all of them smelled the same. Someone must have made a perfume identical to that real flower and applied it to each one of the false flowers. How clever. How confusing. Okay, what was our second guess? By sight. Of course, couldn't he tell the difference between a false flower and a real one? So he walked back up and down every line, but each of the flowers looked the same down to the last microscopic dot of pollen. How could this be? Someone must have perfectly sewn and painted 99 real fake flowers that were a perfect copy of the real flower. How clever. How confusing. The king thought for a while. Touch, of course. But as he touched each and every flower, they felt exactly the same. Someone must have spent hours making all the petals look and feel exactly the same as the real flower. How clever, but how confusing. As the king's admiration for the cleverness of the Queen of Sheba increased, his confidence in his ability to solve this riddle began to wane. How can I tell which is the real flower? Surely there must be a way. Can anybody put into the chat, is there a way we didn't think of? King Solomon looked at them all and they all looked exactly alike. King Solomon smelled them, but somebody had thought ahead and put perfume into each of the flowers. He touched them and every one of them felt the same. One person has a very clever idea to put them in the sun and see if any of them wilt, but I think most people know, slowly, surely, King Solomon began to realize he couldn't solve this riddle on his own. The queen had won. She was cleverer than he. Was Israel destined to be at war with Sheba? He stopped, he sighed, and he was just about to admit that he gave up when a tiny voice piped up. Make way for the king's bee, make way for the king's bee. And King Solomon couldn't believe his ears. The bee whose life he had saved so long ago was back. Bee, is it possible you can help me? He asked. Your Majesty, said the bee, many years ago I begged you to save my life, and in return one day I promised to help you if ever my help was needed. And here I am. Make way for the king's bee, make way for the king's bee. And the bee buzzed up and down the line of blossoms until at last it landed on one of the flowers. It looked the same. It smelled the same. It felt the same. But when the bee said this was the flower, the king believed it. The king took the flower, turned towards the Queen of Sheba, and held it up in the air. And the queen smiled. The bee was right. The king's reputation and the fate of all of Israel was saved. But how did the bee know which was the real flower? How could it tell? Because to a bee, all flowers do not look the same. A bee has different sight than humans. They can see shades of light we can't see. Bees can see ultraviolet light. What to us looks like a plain white flower, to a bee can look like a kaleidoscope of color that makes the path from the tips of the petals down to the heart of the flower and onto the pollen. Many, many flowers use ultralight shades of color to entice and invite the bees to pollinate them. But of course, the king couldn't see the ultraviolet patterns of color on the real flower, but the bee could. And so a king was fooled, but not the bee. Just like the tiny bee, even though we might not know it yet, each of us has powerful gifts that can change the world. No matter how small we feel or how big the odds are that are stacked against us, without each of us, the world would be missing a gift, a kind of wisdom that only we can bring. Everyone is in need of this wisdom, whether they are the ruler of a great empire or just a humble bee. And that is how a bee saved a king long, long ago. or at least that's what I was told.
Thank you, Rabbi. You've taught us a lot about bees in just this story. I put up some photos of the white flowers that looked completely different to a bee than to a human. It's actually very interesting. There's another way that bees need to use their sight. One is to find the flower where they're going to get their pollen and their nectar. The other is to figure out where to go to find the flower once their friends have found it. Their sisters have gone out, come back with pollen, come back with nectar, but you were in the hive the whole time. How do you know where to go? Have any of you learned about the Waggle Dance before? It is maybe one of the coolest ways of communication that I've ever heard. I don't know any other animals that dance in order to communicate with each other. And I don't know of any other animals that dance and we understand what they're saying. After many years of scientific research, we are actually able to figure out exactly where the sister bee is telling all of the hive to go to find the flowers. It's all about the angle of the sun and the angle of the dance and how fast she wiggles and how big of a circle she makes, or if she makes an figure eight instead of a circle. It's a little complicated, but I think you could get it. So I'm going to see if I can play a video of the bees doing the Waggle Dance. And I'm just going to play a little bit. It's going to go fast. See if you can figure out where the waggling bee is. All right, you ready? It's going to be doing a figure eight and like wiggling his tushy a little. Can you see this one? Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, waggle, waggle. So the bees actually have this incredible way of communicating to each other. And I'm not sure if you guys would be able to help me out with this. It's maybe a little silly, but maybe we've reached the silly area of the service. I was going to give you an instruction, and I was thinking that maybe you could make up the Waggle Dance that would go with that. Are you ready? Okay. If your circle is big, it means that your flower is far away. Okay? If your circle's small, then your flower is close to the hive. If you're wiggling a lot, if you're really, really wiggling, it means that you're going to have to put a lot of energy into finding that flower. Maybe it's windy. Maybe it's farther than another, area of flowers that you really want to make sure that the sister bees know exactly where you're going. And the last thing is the direction. If, let's just say, up in your screen is north, the bees always know where the sun is because, as Rabbi Rapport taught us, they can see ultraviolet light. They can actually be looking completely away from the sun on a very cloudy, overcast day and know exactly where the sun is at all times of the day. They're able to even tell if they're inside the hive in the dark for a few hours because they were out in the morning, they can tell in the afternoon. It's quite amazing. So let's just say up is north. All right. So I'm going to say that I would like you to pretend you're a bee. And I would like you to tell your other hive mates that there is a flower really far away to the south. Really, really far away to the south. You can wiggle with your hands. You can get up and walk around. You know, I see one person making circles and circles and circles, and that is actually a specific kind of bee dance. It's called the round dance. And that's what they do when there's a flower area that's close to the hive, because they don't really need to say, go all the way to the north or the east. They're able to just say, it's around here somewhere, and they'll figure it out. And they figure it out by their other senses. They'll smell the bee and they'll say, this pollen smells like a flower I know. And they'll also taste the nectar from the other bee, and they'll say, this seems familiar. Then when they go fly out in the direction they were told, or nearby, if that's the case, they'll be able to smell from the air the flowers that they're trying to find. And so the last thing I have to share with you today is actually a game that you can do after we've sort of ended services, but I want to make sure to give you the link. It's all about the Waggle Dance. I'm just going to show it to you real quick, just so that you see, you know what it is when I give you the link. So this game is all about the Waggle Dance. You can read the instructions, you can read how to play, or you can just play the game. And basically, it's going to tell you that you are a bee. Well, let's see. It's going to tell you that you're a bee, and it's going to tell you what waggle is happening. And you're going to have to figure out where to go to find the flower. So I'm not going to play the whole game, but you can see the waggle is happening in one direction. And let me see, I might have we've got nectar and scent. Then you go find your flowers, and you can zoom all around whichever direction you think the waggle was going. Okay, so that's the idea. I'm going to put the link in the chat, and then you guys can try your hand at it. Maybe you'll be really good at being a bee. Who knows? I'd really like to thank you for coming to services today. I really hope, as I said in the beginning, that you are able to find a sweet new year for yourself. Think of all of the sweetness that the last year has brought you, and think of something that you can do in this year that will make someone else's year sweet. See if you can figure that out today, and just do one sweet thing today for anybody that you see.
Thank you for being our teacher, Jennifer. And we have a couple of important announcements. If you want to go from here to grown-up services, what's happening right now is the Shofar service, and you can get more and more and more shofar if that's what you want to do. We'll make sure that after we finish all of our blessings that we put a link into the chat for everybody to attend grown-up services if they want. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. is our baby service, 0 to 5, for the second day of Rosh Hashanah, with a special story and song and dance with our marvelous song leader, Stephen Figueroa-Smith. If you are not a baby, you are still invited, but you don't have to come. Kids services, ages 6 to 12, are once again 10 a.m. at this Zoom link with more games, more songs, more stories, and a very special flagtacular theme. And this afternoon, if you are in the New York City area and you would like to join us for in-person tashlich, to throw birdseed into the water, symbolic of getting rid of all the things, the gunk we want to clean out from the last year to start the new year fresh, you're totally invited. And you can message Jennifer in the chat. She'll be able to give you some information. It does require registration. The link to the game is going to be sent out to everybody who gave us their email address to be present at the service. And always reminding you that Limud, our awesome children's education program at Cbst, starts in person at 30th Street on October 9th. And the way that we wanted to close our service today is with some of those beautiful faces and voices of our Limud students. I see some of you in the room who helped to put this gorgeous virtual choir song together. It's an important idea in Judaism that we say, Hineni, here I am present, I am showing up for this new year. So here's what's going to happen. We are going to play this beautiful closing song. We're going to say one last blessing, and then we're going to play an awesome movie that our Cbst students created about our community so you can learn a little bit more about who we are, or you can see yourself on TV once again. But you can leave anytime after the blessing. Services are complete until we see you tomorrow. So here it is, Hineni, Here I Am, sung by our incredibly talented Limud students.
I come with joy, I come with hope, I come with vision and intention.
I come with prayer, I come with love, with searching and sacred questions.
Hineni, here I am. I come with peace of mind. I know just where I stand. Here I am. I come with trust. I come with pride. I come with justice and with freedom. I come with history. I come with family, with knowledge and with wisdom. Hineni, here I am. I come with peace of mind. I know just where I stand. Here I am.
Where you go, I will go. Where you lead, I will follow. Your people will be mine,
And your God will be my God. We welcome you with open arms, with joy and hope, with prayer and love. We welcome you with trust and pride, with history and family. Here I am. I've come with peace of mind. I know just where I stand. Here I am. Where you go, I will go. Where you lead, I will follow. Your people will be mine, and your God will be my God. We welcome you with open arms, with joy and hope, with prayer and love. We welcome you with trust and pride, with history and family. Here I am. I come with peace of mind. I know just where I stand. Here I am. Here I am. Here I am.
That was only a year ago.
Thank you, everybody who helped to make such a beautiful piece of music that we get to use year after year.
Yep.
All right, my friends, it's time for a closing blessing. So what I would love you to do is either unmute yourself. We're going to let everybody unmute, or you can put in the chat if you like, or you can express yourself through the language of emoji or interpretive dance. What is a blessing that you wish to see in the new year? Let's just fill the room with tons and tons of blessings. Everything that you hope that you're going to work really hard, that you're going to dedicate your energy to creating in this new year. And I'm going to start us out with the traditional Hebrew formula of blessing a new year. And then I will add to it everything I see in the chat or I hear being said out loud. Yehi ratzon milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu. May it be your will, our God, the God of our ancestors, shetechadesh aleinu shana tova umetuka, that we should be renewed in this year for a sweet and a happy new year, a year that includes great first years at school for lots of us in this Zoom room, for the virus going to stop, and for increased medical and scientific knowledge that help us to protect people's health. A good year, a year in which we work to end violence and promote peace and joy, a great 5th grade, and most of all, peace. And everything else that we add in the chat that comes later, working together and all, no masks, no COVID, yay! Keep those blessings coming. We are going to keep the Zoom room open for people to say hello, Shana Tova, if you would like. And we're also going to play our Pride video quilt. This is a project that we worked on as a school community. It is the story of our community of resistance and love and spirituality. And it is our history, it is our family. It's the way that everybody showed up to say Hineni. You can leave at any time during the video if you like. It's about 10 minutes long. When the video ends, we're going to close the Zoom room just so everybody has clear expectations that we didn't shut the door on you. And as Jennifer said, go eat some honey, make some sweetness for your family and friends. And we hope we get to see you tomorrow for the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Twice as nice. Shana Tova, everybody. We will put into the chat Zoom links for grown-up services and also Zoom links to find us tomorrow if you need. Shana Tova, umetuka, anyana buena, agutayor.
So how did Cbst start?
The synagogue was created by a gay man who didn't know very many people. And after Stonewall, people are kind of out. They're not afraid to be seen or to go to gay locations. And he put an advertisement in the Village Voice. And sure enough, he had 10 people attend, a minyan, to hold a Friday night service in February. And that was the first service at Cbst.
Why is the Stonewall Inn important?
So gay people were allowed, in anywhere. They weren't welcome. Then that was sort of where they went. I think one day the police found it and then they arrested a lot of people.
Tell me the story about what happened on June 28th, 1969.
We were dancing on the floor, and then we just walked up to the bar, and we said, let's get a beer. And suddenly, as we're standing there, the lights go on, the music goes off, and someone yells, raid. And as we walked out the front door into Christopher Street, there was an enormous amount of police cars all facing toward the entrance with their lights on us, spotlighting us as we walked out. The police are trying to disperse us and say, go home, go home. No one wanted to go home. We were just all standing around. The drag queens were the ones who started the rebellion. They're the ones to whom we owe the gay pride movement, because they're the ones who stood up to the police and said, no, we're not leaving. We are who we are, and we're proud of it. They started to dance in the street. They formed a chorus line down Christopher Street, going toward the police. They scattered the police, and the police were there to scatter us. And we were standing there and applauding them and dancing on the street, and it went on all night.
How would you describe the people that are in this photo?
They look happy and they look not afraid anymore.
I think at protests.
Only missing one thing, a pride flag.
Gilbert Baker wasn't Jewish. He showed up at Cbst as a friend of Rabbi Kleinbaum's. He was somebody I hit it off with immediately. A real honor was to be able to spend a day with Gilbert, carry my sewing machine on the subway to 30th Street and sit in the lobby and sew flags. And when he died about a year later, I had the great honor of carrying the rainbow flag at the front of the Pride March.
Can you describe what's happening in this photo?
That photo was taken at 57 Bethune Street, right in the larger room that was the sanctuary. It wasn't so large, but that was the room where the sanctuary was. And that was a period of time when the rabbi arrived, and we basically were taking different photographs so that we could start showing the world and defining who Cbst was, because there was the ritual side of things that, everybody wanted to learn how to read the Torah, how to lead the prayers, how to write, a drasha.
That's the quilt. The synagogue, of course, took on a project of preparing multiple quilts that because it's hanging in the downstairs community room, right by your classrooms.
How did you respond when AIDS hit?
I'm a microbiologist, and it's very much my world. And my friends started getting sick. So I was hearing from multiple directions that something was very wrong. And at the same time, people were coming to me and saying, do you understand what's going on? And over time, we actually did come to understand. So it was very much a tremendous blow. As far as the synagogue, we started to take losses and sickness very early.
Can you describe what's happening in this photo?
A march is happening, and they're outside like some government building.
A protest?
It feels like Judaism and pride. Then the triangle turned into a sign of pride. Look, I'm gay. I'm proud of it. This is why I wear it.
Tell me, what is the story of that picture?
It's Rabbi Kleinbaum getting arrested. Well, I think they're all getting arrested. Rabbi Kleinbaum is just the one who has a bunch of police officers holding her.
It's called civil disobedience. They're saying we're going to stand in this area even if we're not allowed to continue to fight for gay rights.
Do you want to ask me what my favorite thing about Cbst is?
Sure, what's your favorite thing about Cbst?
First of all, I love the high holidays. I think it's wonderful that we have our open door services that welcome everyone. And within the services, the thing that I love most about that is when we bring all of our children up on stage to bless them. And we have our whole community there. And it's just, beautiful to see the generations at Cbst. So that's my single favorite thing, blessing the children.
What did it feel like to get married on the first day that it was legal?
It was totally cool. We were the first couple online in Manhattan at City Hall when we got to go to get our marriage license and get married. And once we walked out of City Hall with our marriage license, Cbst had set up a rainbow chuppah, and the rabbi married us again for the second time. And Rabbi Kleinbaum, for the first time, was able to say, by the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you married.
Have there always been kids at CBST?
Part of what CBST has done is embraced the idea that gay people can have children. And when it first started, that was just not even in the works. You know, I don't think that there were any other, we were obviously the first ones Rabbi Kleinbaum had as babies, but, you know, it was pretty slim to none. It was just the women. And now there's a baby boom. I remember a Rosh Hashanah where Rabbi Kleinbaum told the story about an old guy planting a tree. And somebody said, well, why, you're old, why would you plant like an apple tree? And he said, it's not for me, it's for the next generations. They'll have apples and I'm giving it to them. And that's what she said about trying to start the school you're in and the B'nai Mitzvah class. And you know, just it's for the next generations, and that everybody in the congregation should be committed to you guys.
We will